Welcome Home Radio Podcast. Are you looking to buy or sell your home? Our team is here with answers to guide you through the buying and selling process. We encourage you to ask questions. Please comment on this show or visit us at welcomehomeradio.net for more information. Bringing real estate, lending, and education together in one place, and to help you make the right home decision for you and your family.
And welcome to Welcome Home Radio, where real estate, lending, and learning come together. It is December 18th. So first, we want to wish you a Merry Christmas to you and your family, and of course, a Happy New Year as we head in. Guys, welcome so much. I hope this holiday season has kept you warm, kept you solid. I mean, I hope, Thom, you haven't gone to Austin to do anything drastic yet, have you?
No,
Okay.
I'm just still safely in my place.
Well, he's with us. He didn't get picked up.
Well, guys, we're going to tackle a topic today that I think is still, it's somewhat of a remnant of last week's, but affordability issues in the market are keeping so many people on the sidelines. And rent is one of those critical things, but affordable housing has been a critical piece. Supply and demand, and home prices continue to go up. I mean, when I started working with the Frisco and the PGA Tour area and some of those builders, they were all excited about talking, had some common ground, golfers and whatnot, but they literally were telling me, Blair, we have 52 lots, but we're only going to build 5 homes, 6 homes a year because we want to keep our home prices up and we want to keep that supply and demand of this nice area to those that can afford it. And so is there a plan out there? Is there a workable people where people can actually get affordable housing? $400,000 as a starter home is not affordable housing, in my opinion. Is it to you?
Doesn't feel like it, not one bit. That's just.
And of course, you add on top of that the interest rate combination part, and affordability diminishes, and then you add in the cost of the insurance that's skyrocketed, and that diminishes the possibility of ownership. So this is a real conundrum. And
let's Thom, you just said something that I hadn't heard or I hadn't really thought about when I was reading and looking at topics for today, but insurance is about to be some big changes in this coming year, I'm being told, and I don't know all the details, but you could be looking at needing 3% across the board in a lot of cases. Is that correct?
Say it again.
Deductible? I'm being told by, I don't have all of the details. I should have read on that a little more, but so many insurance companies to where you will not be able to do much better than 3% deductible.
Yeah, that's become a real issue. And the fact that the mortgage companies now have changed their sights on that, and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, FHA and VA have come back and said that they'll allow sometimes in certain areas, depending on the situation, 4% and 5% deductibles. Well, a 5% deductible, think about this, a 5% deductible on a $400,000 house, that house we keep talking about, $400,000, I'm at $20,000 before I start getting into the insurance coverage.
Okay, so how many people have that in their bank? And then what happens if my roof is destroyed by a storm and I don't have that $20,000 for a new roof? I mean,
well, I know you're in the title company. Anybody in the title company business has that money, but
yeah, you need to come to the other side of the fence for a day or two, my friend.
Well, I think that's a valid point, Jeff. Also insurance, but I want to squash something real quick about what Thom said about interest rates. Interest rates seem to be, everybody's waiting for them to come down, but let's set expectations. Let's get into the heads of our listeners and making sure they understand interest rates in our lifetime will never be in the 2.5 to 3s ever again. We're hoping at best. Would you agree, Thom?
Well, I'm going to live to be 150, so it may happen in my lifetime. But
all right.
Well, I'm glad you have that plan. I don't care to live 150. If I can't play golf.
I mean, look at you now.
Wow. Wow. Feel the love at the holiday season and cheer. And
well, Blair, let me ask you guys a question, because realistically, we had COVID, which, that was its own time that we all went through and we learned from it. But really from 2019 to 23, there was so much that's been happening, but that was the biggest part of where we saw like 40% as far as the increase on the cost of a home and the median income. That was when we saw that really take that jump. And then since 23, since last year, we just saw the rates that jump. So we're just like we've talked about on other shows, we're seeing the rates tick down a little bit. But I guess what I'm getting at, with so much of an increase in a small window of time, will we see it slowly stagger back down? Is there a way that that's possible?
I totally agree with that. We're going to see another cut of 25 bips at the Fed level, and the market's already expecting that. It would be a shock if that doesn't happen to it, and that will cause. Jerome Powell has made the sense that, well, we're not committed to another whole point next year in 2025. That's what he said in his last notes. But more and more of the Fed members think they need to attack it aggressively. And therefore, I think the vote will be that we'll still continue to see. But we won't see a true change of, let's say, a whole interest point until the end of 2025. So where your mindset has to be, am I buying a home, or is this home going to be more affordable then? But how much money am I losing in appreciation over that time? That's why it's so important for people to understand debt is a terrible thing. The only debt that is a good thing, in my opinion, is a mortgage, because it appreciates and it gains wealth. It continues to grow. Where a car is driven off the lot, it loses $2,000 to $3,000. We have to be able to understand, if I buy this home now, but I'm going to see that increase into my net worth over that home instead of waiting. The cost of waiting is so much more, I'm going to say 95% of the time. Because waiting on that interest rate, if that's what you're waiting on, or waiting on that perfect home, that's a challenge. The best time to buy was when it was 7, because I know I'm going to refinance in 24 months at least. So it's not that big of a deal, but the money you will make in your net worth impacts. I mean, would you agree with that, Thom? Did I explain that in an easy way, or is there more?
I think that's pretty understandably easy to understand. Yes. I think the big issue that we come back to time and time again is, how can a house be more affordable? Well, it comes down to kind of a basic structural premise that your city founders and fathers have to say, well, you're going to build some affordable housing. These houses are going to be smaller. They're going to be more basic type of housing circumstances. And I know my city fathers here would, jump up in arms. Everybody would run down to City Hall and say, you can't build that crap. And that's just, the mentality is part of we talk about it, we need it, but not in my backyard is the real approach that we take. And that's the kind of shameful part of us as a nation that should take care of people that want to better themselves and get their first foot in the door and build generational wealth, providing the opportunity for doing that. Now, I take an example that I've done some research, and as you may be aware, I spend a lot of time down in Austin nowadays, sitting outside my daughter's house, making sure that her boyfriend goes home every night.
But somebody's got to do it.
But when I'm driving around the neighborhoods there, I was taken back with a neighborhood with more than 250 manufactured homes having been plopped down in this area. And I thought to myself, this looks very nice. It was laid out appropriately. And you talk about affordable housing, what that created out in this particular area in Austin, in the city limits of Austin, was a housing type of development that ranged from about 250 up to about 3.25. And the homes all were 1,900, 1,800, 22,000 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, double wide manufactured homes. But I was just taken back with how good that area looked. Now, a huge amount of uniformity. And of course, in my part of the world, people would come unglued and say, not in my backyard. But I mean, this was impressive. It was so well done. It was so well laid out. It's so efficient looking. And it was giving people that opportunity. And I know that they were all brand new and, they're going to look like heck in, 3 years or 5 years. But all I could think to myself is it's going to be hard to do that. If somebody's buying one of these, they're spending a ton of money to get into it. They're not going to let it go to heck in a handbasket. They're going to take care of it just like you would with a regular stick and brick house. And that was a major solution that, of course, Austin came up with to promote and make it so that people have affordable housing. And that again comes from the very core roots of our governmental fathers, our local folks that run the mayor and the townships and the city councils that oversee this type of stuff, your P&Zs. They've got to step forward and say, well, maybe at least in our neighborhood, 5 acres or 3 acres or something like that to help with these issues, to build the appropriate housing that is affordable.
I'm curious if there's numbers on, because we are hearing the commercials, obviously, of not outside of Dallas, outside of Fort Worth, 5 acres, 129,000, right? Or I wonder how we could check the numbers on those who are working from home still. We know that fluctuates with companies, but how many have moved out in that way because they don't need to worry about driving an hour and 45 minutes into work? That can make a big difference for someone.
Yeah, and that was a big deal in this particular location because it was in the city of limits of Austin. And literally, it was on the east side, which is an interesting area of development, but you could literally get on 4th Street out there and be downtown in about 15 minutes, 12 minutes, something like that.
That's pretty cool.
It was a straight shot into the city type situation. And those are the other concerns, because if you don't have mass transit, and most of our cities in Texas don't really invest hugely in mass transit and it gets a bad rap, then you've got to make it so that this stuff is built where it's not all the way in Crum, Texas. And for our listeners in Australia, Crum, Texas is out in the boondocks. Just so you know. Okay. You know where boondocks are.
It is. Now I was about to say, explain what boondocks are.
Well, one of the challenges that I think we need to make sure our listeners understand is there is a difference between North Texas and Austin. We're seeing prices going up and down, fluctuating more than we see in North Texas. And in Texas is overall, we don't see the fluctuation of pricing going up and down like we see on the East or West Coast, because we have in this state a requirement to hold on to 20% equity in a home for cash outs and all this. We require that to maintain so it doesn't fluctuate a lot. But once that growth of home prices goes up, as he said, Thom made it very clear, not in my backyard are we going to allow somebody to bring my home price down, because it's an investment. And that's what the long-term people need to understand. Now, there's so many younger generations that, hey, it's okay, I don't own a home. I have no problem with it. And I want to rent because I want to travel, I want to do. Well, rent is going up and up. I don't know how that's going to be maintained. And they continue to throw that wealth out the door, where a mortgage you're paying yourself. It's a dramatic mindset difference, I think. And I want to make sure people understand that, because we're not going to see those interest rates insurance is an issue that, yes, I'm blessed to still have a 1% deductible. Very blessed. And don't see that changing anytime soon. At least USAA's told me that. But I have seen deductibles going up. I've seen costs going up. And affordability of housing. And the thing is, I don't want a government solution, because what are the worst words in the world to hear? I'm from the government. I'm here to help. It's scary. Very.
They're just going to write checks, right?
I was going to say, so the people from the military that come and say they're helping, we have to worry about them?
Those, I think, would feel a little more comfortable with, right?
They're with the government.
Well, they still remember us, you and I.
Well, I believe that, and I see changes in that, but I just, what other things can we be doing to help affordable housing? Because I would love for these larger home builders to get on board and make sure a subdivision has, the 250, 275 housing. It may be only 1,800 square feet to 22, but you know what? They've got it in their subdivision, and then you can have your 400,000 average. But no, I don't know if it's greed. I don't know if it's just it's poor planning, or, hey, it's all about a buck.
Maximizing revenue, sir. Maximizing revenue.
I was going to say the last one is probably about the choice we're talking here.
Well, how do we make affordable housing? And I'm not saying we can solve it here, but there are ways for an individual to look at things. And yes, if you're on the sidelines waiting on interest rates, you're going to wait a long time. If you're waiting for you to be affordable and finding something, set a goal, because how many years, guys, does first-time home buyers live in a home on the average?
3.
1. 5. It's like 4.7 something, right?
It's 3 to 5 years. This is not a home you're going to stay with, but at least you're building wealth, because you're learning what you do and do not like in a home, so that the next home you can do better at. Okay.
Well, and that's a reality too. I think you make a really good point, Blair, with regards to that, and this is something realistic that, I had to talk with Marin about when she was buying her house. I said, you're not going to be able to buy the house that mom and dad live in, not your first house. And she said, well, what do you expect? And I said, well, if you're fine, I want you to find a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house that, you have to go and build a fire in the kitchen to make it heated during the winter time. And she just looked at me like I'd lost my mind, which she does a lot nowadays. But the reality is that
I understand that look and that thought.
You do, don't you? That daughter thing will do that for you. But the reality, when we actually approached this, was more like we were able to kind of compromise, because she ended up, with the concept of, I'm taking all the roommates I've got currently. It's interesting. I asked her, she bought the house during June, July timeframe this year. And of course, it's December. The house that she vacated with her 3 other roommates that started renting from her in the new house, that old house they were in is still not leased.
Really?
6 months later.
It went up in price so much. It's amazing.
Again, when we kind of get into this, is setting that expectation for our buyers that, there are houses, and I kind of hate saying this, I've got a friend of mine who's in a situation where she really has kind of taken some bad turns because of health issues and coming out of COVID and things that have been long-term permanent damage that she's had to work with. She started looking at houses, and she goes to get qualified, and she gets qualified for about a $75,000 maximum house. Well, there are $75,000 maximum houses out there. And that's the interesting part, because I do know that some people, in order to buy a house, you have to change your approach. Now she's in a situation where she doesn't have to worry about, driving to work every day. So she's got the flexibility there. But even if you were looking at $150,000 and $200,000 houses, there is inventory. It's not the nicest inventory in the world, clearly. But if you got the patience and you've got the, backbone that you can do it with the younger folks, I still remember my first, 2-bedroom, 1-bath house that I bought on Cherrywood Lane in San Antonio. And there was work that had to be done, but it had good bones and it was a good house. And so you went in and did the painting stuff. You did the rearranging of the kitchen area. You did things that made it more your house and better for you and your situation, owning that house. So you've got to go in there with some vision. And that's, I think, a part of the responsibility of the real estate industry, to set those expectations more along those lines than, well, here's the nicest house in the neighborhood. You can afford this. We'll just make that loan officer work harder. Well, you don't make the loan officer work harder to make more money for you to show up. You've got to set those expectations to where, well, that first house you're going to own is not going to be the perfect house. You may feel not as comfortable in it, but if you get to know your neighbors and everything, that's the idea about owning a house, is you get to know your neighbors. I've got 3 of my neighbors next door, 2 doors down and behind me. They all have keys to my house. And I told them that if they ever see the house on fire, come and unlock the doors to at least let the cats out. They don't have to come in and get me. But, let the cats and the dogs out, and those cats and dogs, they'll find their way out.
Well,
I tell you what, I've got one idea, Tom. We have Uncle Blair on the radio show with us today. So, if Uncle Blair, if you'll just fund the project, I'll develop some 1,700 square foot homes in the 350 range. You back it. We'll turn the revenue for you, and we'll make this happen.
I know, and he's a loan officer, so we know he can afford to do it.
Well, maybe we can consider that. Maybe a few listeners come in and help us out. We get some things going.
We have the knowledge. We know that.
We do have the knowledge.
Well, I'm going to call it a crisis. I'm not going to call it just a challenge. I think it's a crisis. I think it's an educational crisis that comes along with, like you said, buyers and sellers, knowing what their home is worth, knowing what the home is worthy of, understanding what the future may hold for them. I think there's an education on people that are trying to sell their home and how much their home is really worth, as opposed to what they want to sell it for. Because Tom and Sue down the street sold it for this. My home's 100 square foot larger. I want this amount, and it comes down to education.
And those folks, a lot of them are still trying to recoup the $40,000 over asking price they paid for that home.
They paid, yes.
To before they're going to make a move. So think about that a lot as well.
And then there's people hanging on to that 2.5% mortgage rate and it doesn't make sense, but yet they're paying 25% on their credit cards. And there's a huge education here that needs to happen. So, well, guys, I want to wish you a Merry Christmas. I hope you got plans for family, I hope, and friends. I hope you enjoy this season. It's always a challenge with our kids spread out everywhere that we get to see two sets of them at least. But I haven't traveled to Italy lately to see my daughters over there. So, but I hope they have a good time, and I hope you guys
get on your private plane. We know you have one, Blair.
My private plane is that Matchbox size, and it's a 1-seater. So my wife will go with me. But I wish I could, but that's not something that's possible anytime soon. But I hope you Merry Christmas to you guys. Merry Christmas to the audience. Find us again at welcomehomeradio.net. Have a blessed time, and we'll see you next year.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
Welcome Home Radio
Happy
production
New Year.
provided by Lunatic Digital. Check the listing of this podcast for the links to our sponsors. And don't forget to like, share, and follow us on social media. Visit welcomehomeradio.net for more information.
This was a Lunatic Digital production. Visit lunaticdigital.com for all your digital needs.